Hello and welcome back to the Old School MMA reviews. I am the Fight Nerd. Across the screen from me is Zane Simon, and we are here today to bring you the white collar event of bare knuckle fighting, the Ultimate 1995, one of the most amazing tournaments to ever be held inside the octagon. Zane, my nipples are hard with excitement.
I damn it, you totally threw me off. I was so prepared up to that. You do look perky. You do look unusually perky today, I'll say that.
I feel like a schoolgirl walking to school on Christmas morning or something like that. I don't know.
You look closed on Christmas, Matt.
Yeah, I don't know. This is I'm just so excited because it's Ultimate 95, and we've
It
been fighting
is.
for this one for a while. Zane, this is the pinnacle of the UFC.
I don't know where they got the idea, but this was a great idea to round up all of all the top fighters that have been coming back to their organization and put them all together in one big tournament. Get rid of all the new guys and the one-off fighters that they put into the early rounds of each tournament and just chock it full of familiar names, and it was awesome.
That's right. So we are returning to Denver, Colorado, the site of the very first UFC. That was just about 24 months and a few weeks, essentially before this one. It's already hard to believe it's been 2 years, and a lot has happened in these 2 years. We've seen a very fast evolution in the way the sport is. The UFC has taken off. It's getting bigger and bigger each event. And like I said, this is pretty much the big one. This is essentially 4 champions are returning, 3 runner-ups are returning, and as Bruce Beck says, rather, there's one man who's back called the Giant Killer.
Right. I love that they are trying to promote people now as familiar through nickname. I mean, they've only been 7 of these, and you'll know him, the Giant Killer. And it's like, oh yeah, Keith Hackney. Yes, I suppose if I was buying every one of these pay-per-views, I'd know. But yeah, I mean, it is weird just because the tournament already the sport has totally changed in the 2 years. I mean, the field that they're casting is totally unlike what you saw in the first 3 or 4 events.
Yeah, this is a pretty big one. We really have some of the best in this event as well. We have essentially, some guys who I wish were there but weren't going to be there. They'll be, gone for a while essentially from the sport, i.e. Hoist Gracie. We're not going to see him in this event. But what we do have is we have champion Dan Severn, champion Oleg Taktarov, champion Marco Ruas. We would have had Pat Smith, but for whatever reason he was medically disqualified for reasons we'll never know, hepatitis maybe, but we'll never know the truth to that.
Yeah, could be any of a number of things. Could have been an outstanding warrant. Could have been a strange and unusual disease picked up in parts unknown. Pat
From
Smith,
parts unknown.
from parts unknown. Pat Smith not on the card. Instead, we get the polar bear, Paul Varelans.
Yes, and Varelans is one of your personal favorites also, so this must have made you much more happy to see him rather than Smith.
It did. I was much more excited to watch Paul Varelans get in there and face off against Dan Severn, and that was definitely fun for me.
Yeah,
I think Pat Smith against Paul. I think Pat Smith would have been the same. Eventually, it would have been the same fight. Not to spoil things too much, but
spoiler alert, although it would have been fun seeing what Dan Severn could do to Pat Smith, because at this point, too, Pat was also becoming a much better, smarter fighter, so and more agile for sure than Varlin. So I would have been curious to see how Severn would handle a guy like him.
it's true. Severn did have trouble. If people were willing to throw kicks on the outside, he did actually have a little trouble closing distance on that. That wasn't his best thing. He was good if people wanted to try and rush in and clinch on him. Then he was a monster. But he might have had a little trouble with some decent footwork in boxing, as he did later on in the event.
As he did.
Again.
Yeah, spoiler alert, spoiler. We're bad at spoilers, but let's talk a little bit about numbers first before we get into the show itself. The attendance was 2,800, which is normal for the Mammoth Gardens that we've seen before when they've held UFCs there in the past. The buy rate was up from the last event. We now are about, I believe it was 250,000 buys, which is up about 60,000 buys from the last show. So again, it's a bigger event. They're getting a little more hits. Not like it's anything that's gone insanely big in a while, but still a very good number for what the UFC was doing.
Yeah, no,
And,
considering what other events would later end up trying to pull on pay-per-view, getting 250,000 buys in your seventh event, like, or your eighth event, is pretty great. At a time when you're still relatively unknown.
I mean, essentially it's stabilized. Really they haven't gone up and down too drastically. I mean, 60,000 loss is pretty good. Or 6,000 up rather is still pretty good. But for the most part, they've really stayed in the same area right now in terms of viewers. So that's pretty good. It's a victory for all their shows, and obviously they want to keep doing better. But all things considered, not a bad rating.
No, I mean, they've got shows running now that get less than 250,000 buys.
That's called Ultimate Fighter, yes. Also of note, this is now the tournament that has the biggest prize ever in the UFC history, which is 250,000. Oh wait, no, it's not.
No, it's 150,000. Yes. Bruce Beck flies right out of the gate with the first gaffe by misannouncing the grand total for the prize.
He gives us our first Bill Wallace moment of the night.
That's right. Curse of the Superfoot returns. But I heard that, and I was like, oh my god, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money now to win, for a fighter to win in one night.
That's basically what they made in the Pride Grand Prix 2000. That was what the guy who won that made. That's what Mark Coleman made of that event, basically. And then for this event to be making that much, that's insane. But luckily, as we found out moments later from Jeff Blatnick, it was not 250,000. It was just a mere peasant's 150,000.
That's right. A pittance. A pittance.
A tuppence, if you will.
A tuppence, yes. That makes sense.
We have our three men in the booth tonight: Bruce Beck, Jeff Blatnick, both returning. As is Don the Dragon Wilson. Once again, no Jim Brown. I don't know where he is exactly, but Jim Brown is off somewhere in the world, probably liberating some country from terrorists. Who knows what he does?
That's right. Maybe he's making another blaxploitation movie somewhere. With Fred Williamson. He and Fred Williamson are teaming up.
I wonder if they have before. Have they?
Yeah, they have. I think Fred Williamson, Jim Brown, and Jim Kelly were all in one movie.
Holy shit!
Yeah, magic is real. Magic is real.
Miracles can happen, and dreams can come true.
That's right.
So we also have Jeff Blatnick's 3 points, by the way. I want to mention that real quick as well. As a package of the show, Jeff Blatnick makes his 3 points of who the winner will be, essentially, and what factors will be involved in that. And that will be experience, preparedness, and incentive.
Or as I like to call it, digestion, new skills, and money.
Pretty much. That's basically what it was, and then I guess someone backstage just gave him a little post-it note with the SAT words on it.
That's right.
Like, don't say that. You say these instead.
I also like the opening tagline for this one, or Bruce Beck's opening tagline, which was "Fighting systems judged and found wanting."
Is that like a Craigslist ad? What is that?
It's an idea too that like nothing works. That's what the ultimate. That's what the UFC is proving. The UFC proves that nothing works.
I just like when Bruce Beck called it the martial arts melting pot as well, which is accurate. But still, just it's a funny little alliteration. That's I don't know how effective it is, but it definitely is that thing that Beck said.
So, how badly did you want to see Night Hunter after the plug for that?
Oh my God! I mean, well, now that you mentioned this movie with Jim Kelly and Jim Brown and Fred Williamson, I think I want to see that more. But yeah, Don Wilson was there promoting his new movie or TV show or whatever in God's name that thing was, Night Hunter.
They even played a clip from it. I was surprised that they were going like full promotion for Don Wilson. That seemed like a lot to splash out for Don Wilson. Maybe it was required in his contract or something. They'd plug his new movie.
Most likely, yeah. I mean, we were watching the Silver Vision UK version of this event, which is essentially the pay-per-view feed. So, I'm sure future releases, I don't even think VHS had that in it, but I'm sure future releases will not have that in it. But essentially, the tagline for that was, "Where a vampire and a dragon fight to the end." And if that alone doesn't make you want to see this movie, you are not human.
That's right. And the promotional poster tagline was "Wooden stakes and silver bullets can't save you now. You better pray Jack Cutter can." So
Wow, just wow. I mean, if that movie had Jim Brown, Fred Williamson, and Jim Kelly also in it, that might be the greatest thing ever made, next to the
well,
Octagon.
I'm pretty sure it had a vampire and an explosion, which that pretty much makes it gold for me.
And this is back in the '90s when vampires weren't made of glitter.
That's right. They were real manly 80s women with perm vampires.
Dem perms. So we also had Don Wilson saying that, or basically this is his way of essentially plugging the slogan of the company, but in a very natural kind of way, where he went on to say, people were asking me if the UFC stuff is real, and I would tell them it's as real as it gets. Like, wow, just way to perfectly use that slogan. That was good. He gets some applause for that.
He does. He fit that in pretty well. I wasn't even sure. It's like, had they even used his real sketch before this? It's been a few months since I'd seen the last show, so I couldn't remember. I was like, wow, that really fit. Very, very nice. Although I find it funny that one of the first questions I still get asked from people who are unfamiliar with the sport is it real?
Yeah, no, I hear that all the time still this day. It's like we're in the year 2013, and people still refuse to believe it's real, which is just
Yeah.
bizarre. It's like, how much more real do you need to be? There's a guy's face like ripped apart, and what do you need to see to confirm it's realism? Do you need to go in there yourself?
Yeah, no kidding. Like, it's just pro wrestling, right? I mean, they're just, it's like, you watching it? Does that look like it's pro wrestling? Can you really not see the difference? Eh.
Meh.
What a bunch of bastards, I tell you.
People are bastards. Good night, folks.
That's right. And that's all we have. So,
Yeah.
also in the lead up to the first fight action, we get a new commissioner of the IFC.
We
Ron
did.
Van Cleef has been shown the door.
The former UFC veteran, who they've only mentioned being a UFC veteran once.
That's right. The Black Dragon. Maybe because they have a new dragon, they could get rid of. They felt like they could get rid of the Black Dragon.
They can only have one dragon. It had to be Don Wilson. He was a superior dragon.
That's right. And so no longer do we have Ron Van Cleef. It's now Art Davie, the one of the CEO of SEG, right? Or the
He was one of the founding members of the UFC. One of those dealies.
yeah. One of the founding members of the UFC is now the head of the IFC, just to make it especially clear that the IFC is only there to make sure that the UFC gets licensed wherever it wants to go.
And most likely, we thought the real reason might have been that Ron Van Cleef may have been involved with another MMA company, a rival company, but we never really will know the truth. I guess of that situation. I don't remember really seeing Ron Van Cleef getting into too much MMA at that era, but that
I
is
think
a
he was
possibility.
Rumor was he was trying to start his own MMA company at the time, do sort of a Battlecade thing or something,
Battlecade. We'll be talking about that soon, I think. Very soon, actually.
Yeah, I think so.
We're going to have to. We'll have to get John Purdy on here and we'll have to talk some Battlecade.
Yeah, I kind of got on his bad side recently because I was supposed to do an interview with him, but I gave it to somebody else, and then who has not gotten back to me yet. But so I have a bunch of information on John Peretti that I need to get to so that I can, not burn that bridge as fast as I otherwise might.
Meanwhile, back in Octagon land, we do have some new changes to the Ultimate. Since this is a big tournament, we have a few different rules, essentially. There is time limits now. The opening rounds will have 15-minute time limit. The second round, 18. And then the finals will be a 27-minute fight with a 3-minute overtime if needed. And also a very big and very welcome change. This is now the first event to have judges.
That's right. And the judging criteria, part of which is still in use today, was aggression and effectiveness. That was pretty much the whole judging criteria.
That's
striking
literally that.
And then grappling effectiveness.
So literally just those two things. And luckily, the judges got everything right. But yeah, not much of a criteria to judge, to be quite honest. It's it's not like they're scoring hits or that kind of stuff. It's just very broad strokes in terms of what's being scored. But hey, it worked for these old UFCs, so things get better. There's not really any controversial decisions that happen for really quite some time.
No.
So everything works out fine. And just so you all know, our judges tonight are Ernest Hart Jr., John Little, and Michael D. Pasquale.
Or as I said, a kickboxer, a martial arts magazine editor, and a traditional jiu-jitsu instructor.
So basically, they could have just actually entered the UFC themselves.
Pretty much. They were as qualified as anyone else in there, pretty much. They were as qualified as Tank Abbott.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. So also returning to the UFC is our favorite ring announcer, Rich Gogo G-Man Goins.
That's right. Goings.
And we did that in perfect timing. That was amazing. And at this event, Goins is basically trying to give himself a catchphrase. It does not work, as we'll see.
No. He was all over the place tonight. It was always like right after they like, he did his announcement and they pan away, and at the very last second, out of nowhere, he did this like extra burst of catchphrase where it was just like he just like said it while he was running out of the octagon.
It was basically a total afterthought, and I guess we'll start talking about the fights right now. But basically, after he announced the first fight, as he was walking out of the ring, he goes, he's like, and the referee for the fight will be Big John McCarthy. Let's get it on, and he runs away basically. And that's first the only time you'll hear Goins say, "Let's get it on." So I think after that, I have a feeling McCarthy is probably like, "That's my phrase. No, you get your own."
Yeah. Maybe even backstage after that fight, maybe in the ring, because he changed it really quick.
He sure did, in a very panicky kind of way.
Yeah. No, so one thing I liked about this, first off, we'll say, as we get into the first fight here between Tank Abbott and Steve Jenham, was that they were now introducing fighters with their UFC records. Something actually thoroughly verifiable, rather than some street fighting, bare knuckle, taekwondo competition record or something.
Yeah, it's about time. I mean, now at this point, they've had 7 events. All these guys are veterans, so they actually have legitimate records now in the octagon. So it's about damn time. And realistically, it really couldn't have been done up until now, or it would have been very hard to do it before then. I mean, because they've all fought unverifiable stuff. Now they finally have a legit record. It's been enough events where now it's being taken more seriously, and that's why this event is ultimately being held, because it is the best of the best, or whoever was available that night, to compete and see who was the ultimate fighter.
That's right. So yeah, I mean, I was really happy to have that, because that's one of the big gripes of like how badly how sketchy the early UFCs were, which was just how much stuff you get away with making up because they had to promote these guys somehow, and it was always 400-0, or Hoist Gracie has never lost before. He comes into the ring tonight with a record of 51-2. And you're just like, wait, that can't be right.
Yeah,
one of these things is a direct lie.
Yeah, and speaking of Hoist, I think we should probably talk about him a little later. I think at the end of the show, we're going to do a little thing of what if you will, where we'll talk about the guys who could have been in this, why they potentially weren't, and what could have happened had they been there.
Totally. Worth doing.
Yes, but before we actually jump into that first fight, Zane, we do have 2 alternate bouts. Would you like to tell us what they were? Unfortunately, neither of us saw them, but there were 2 alternate bouts, and they weren't really even acknowledged during the telecast.
Yeah, I totally didn't even realize they existed. Just pulled up the watched the event, got done. I was like, hey, I watched it all, took notes, everything, I'm ready. And then we came on. You're like, oh yeah, there are alternate bouts. So wait, I had no clue. So yeah, there was Joe Charles, who beat Scott Basak via arm lock, and Mark Hall, who beat Trent Jenkins via arm lock. So we missed out on the Ghetto Man, and I feel bad about that.
We missed out on the Ghetto Man, and we also missed out on everybody's favorite dad, Mark Hall.
That's right. Everybody's favorite dad / softball coach, Mark Hall.
Yeah, I mean, how those fights were, we'll never know. I don't think. Well, there's no DVD release of this other than the Silver Vision, UK old DVD of the pay-per-view itself. Zuffa to this date has not released this event on their official Anchor Bay release DVDs. I don't know why. I think the event is available online through their online YouTube service for pay, but no DVD yet, which is very bizarre. So it's like they're acknowledging it on the internet, but not in DVD releases, and that's too bad, because really, this is an event worth watching.
Yeah.
As we'll be discussing later on. But this is definitely an event that, if you guys are watching these and you don't watch them after seeing the event, this is one you definitely want to see.
It is. It really is. I mean, not every moment of it is thrilling, but it's really overall an important event.
Yeah, these are the fights that we've been kind of wanting to see. Right? We would have never seen otherwise. This is a lot of them happening all on the same night, which that alone is pretty great.
Yeah, and there was some pretty serious, there were some pretty dominant performances in here.
Well, mostly in the first rounds, which we'll discuss. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's time to get into the first fight now, which is, as you said before, Steve Jenham, everybody's favorite ninja cop.
No longer a ninja though. Now it's taijutsu.
Taijutsu, which is the art of ties. I don't know.
I didn't take the moment. I looked at it, said that sounds made up, and then I didn't look it up to see how made up it is.
I'm pretty sure it is legit. It's just, who cares? He's a ninja cop.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's studying ninjutsu under what's his name?
Frank Dukes.
What?
Frank Dukes.
Yeah. No,
you almost fell for it. That was good.
I can't remember the ninjutsu coach that Steve Denham and the other guy who got his face elbowed to death by Orlando V, was it, or was it
yeah, way back in UFC too.
Yeah,
Scott Morris.
Scott Morris. They both studied ninjutsu under the same guy, under the same system. That's the guy who invented that system now runs pro wrestling promotions. So that tells you just how heavily he believed in the traditional martial art of ninjutsu.
Yeah. Either way, he's our favorite ninja cop, and he always will be. That's his place in our hearts.
He is forever ninja cop, even if he's now Tai Ninja Cop.
Taijutsu ninja cop. Sounds like a Naruto martial art.
It does.
When you see like Naruto's anime, it's like, use your taijutsu effect now. Believe it. Fucking Naruto. Anyway, that's our only Naruto reference we're ever going to make this entire series. So go fuck yourselves if you like him. And don't ever expect an Inuyasha reference. Anyway, Ninja Cop is fighting our favorite overweight
only
bar.
for something that lasts forever. I'm making an Inuyasha reference for maybe for Severn versus Shamrock too.
If you can find a way to do that, then yes.
All right. So yeah, first fight of the night, and man, Tank showed up with wrestle boxing and full display.
Oh no, he looked amazing. This was a dominant performance that people forgot. I forgot about this first round fight. And as we've talked about in the past with Tank, he has not gotten his his just due really in the last few years because people have forgotten his legacy. But this was one of these events where, again, you get to see how good Tank was. You also get to see how bad he was. But you get to see just how damn good he could be when he wanted to be. And he also, as Blatnick said, all these guys come in, preparedness, whatever. Preparedness was a factor. All the competitors came super ready, especially Tank. Like, Tank, despite having a 50-pound weight difference between him and Jenham, Tank looked to be in very good shape for this one.
Yeah, no, I
mean, Jenham too, though. Jenham, really, just we'll get that out of the way now. But basically, every single fighter in this thing looked really good. Everybody lost weight. Their bodies are different.
Yep.
Cardio was way better. It had to be for this kind of event. And Tank especially, he looked really good. Despite being like the alleged 280 pounds, he looked really fit for that size.
Yeah, I mean, he really is the first wrestle boxer. He's not the most successful one, but he was the first guy to be able to box well enough to hurt people and wrestle well enough to get them down.
Which is essentially what happened here. I mean, Tank just shot right away for the really quick takedown. He got it with pretty much ease, complete ease.
And then one via extreme leaning. That's what I wrote. That was a victory due to extreme leaning.
Essentially, that's what it was. I mean, he basically just once he got Jenham down, just started muscling him against the fence. Went for what was kind of sort of a neck crank, but ultimately just kind of him squeezing Jenham's neck into the side of the fence. But hey, it did the trick. And
he just put the top of his head right up against Jenham's chin and turned his neck right into the cage as hard as he could.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very quick fight. It's a minute and 14. Dominant performance. I mean, basically, there's not much else to talk about in this fight other than, Tank threw a few punches, but mostly when he was on the ground. He didn't really throw any punches standing, if I remember correctly.
He threw one overhand right as he dived in.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, I forgot even that. 'Cause it must have been quick then. I know once he's on the ground, I know he did hit him a few times, but not much. I mean, he basically just knew to conserve his energy, get out of this round, and go on to the next one. And that's basically what he did. You know, he just did the minimum amount of ground and pound needed to soften up Jenham, give him to open up, and then just went for that cage crank, let's call it.
Yeah, cage crank.
That's pretty much it. I mean, good performance by Tank. Fight's over. Zane, what else do we need to say?
Yeah, no, I was impressed. It was just like I say, it was a classic wrestle boxing performance. Couple of punches on the feet, dive in for a takedown, and then just muscle the guy out.
And it's kind of also, in a way, a pass of the guard, essentially, because Jenham is really from that old days of the UFC, essentially, and Tank is from the slightly newer breed. So this was essentially Tank showing that, you know, if you're still doing one martial arts style, and you can't hang with a guy that's doing at least two now, like Tank doing the wrestle boxing, you know, what good are you in the UFC? You're pretty much done, and that's what happened here. Jenham's still doing that one style. Tank is mixing things up, and that was it. Jenham didn't evolve.
Well, it was also one of the big things you see about the UFC, especially you see in this event in spades, was that the UFC really, a lot of it became about pain tolerance too, which was just like
Taktarov.
Yeah, it's just, you know, you will, depending on how much of a beating you're willing to take, you will win fights. You know, like that, it was, not only was it having the dual skills, but it was like you can't just know a martial art. You have to be willing to get hit a lot, and you have to be willing to get hurt really badly and still keep going. And Jenham, you know, he was in a neck crank position, which is painful, but he just tapped out, you know?
That's pretty much it. There wasn't much else to it. And speaking of, you know, getting hit that much, let's move on to our second fight, where nary a strike was thrown. As we now get the Polar Bear, we're taking his return. Paul Varelans. He is back now against Dan the Beast Severn. So we have our UFC 5 winner going up against a runner-up from the last UFC.
Yep, and Varelans comes in with a new art as well. Not only is he now a master of trap fighting, but he's also now a master of free-form freestyle fighting.
Yeah, I don't know what any of that crap is, but yeah.
I'm pretty sure that is absolutely just an easy way to say that he has no martial arts experience whatsoever.
And it pretty much shows against Dan Severn.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and in our classic, what is billed as our classic Alaska versus Michigan matchup.
Whose blood runs colder.
And this is where I believe and this is where we instantly saw our switch to now let's rock and roll.
Yeah, instantly. Right as soon as he gets the
screamed that one.
Yeah, he was like, I'm just gonna say, get out of here for Big John McCarthy rips my head off.
So yeah, that was all. He, you know, Severn. It was just all wrestling. Shot in for a double. Varelans had both his feet under him and toppled over. And then from there, Blatnick had no idea how to call the fight.
Which is a case that happens quite often in these early UFCs still.
Yeah, he was just like, oh, he's got a semi-choke there when, you know, Severn's really deep on the arm triangle. And it was a gorgeous arm triangle. I mean,
it was very tight, especially against a guy that big. I mean, that was tight.
It was, it's, you know, it's the exact same move you see now. There's no, at this point, you're starting to see more technique that is a direct translation of what you see now in a fight.
Which is a good sign. It means we're getting to the good stuff now. It's about damn time. We've already sat through essentially 2 years worth of street fights. Now we're actually getting some technique.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it was just a really nice arm triangle. Got on top of him, sunk it in, and he went out.
And one thing worth noting also about this fight, too, is that Severn actually threw no strikes at all.
No.
He did not throw one strike at all on his feet on the ground. He did what he had to do, took the fight to where it needed to go, and did it as quick as he could.
Yeah, no, well, it's part of that whole conservation thing. You know, you really got the guys who had won already, who knew exactly what they wanted to get through this as quickly as possible, and not injure your hand, because the way everybody gets, you know, wins and has to get out of these tournaments is through hand injuries.
Yeah, so far, basically, both these fights have barely gotten out of the first minute. And this next fight, same thing. It's not going to go that long as well. We now have another returning champion, Oleg Taktarov, the Russian Bear. He is back against another former guy that has competed before in the octagon, Dave Benetow. So we have Canada versus Russia here.
That's right. And Benetow, apparently, I caught this in the commentary, has been working with Emmanuel Stewart for this fight.
Yeah, I heard that too, which is a big surprise. They got Emmanuel Stewart, which now, since you brought it up, Zane, it begs the question: what would happen if Emmanuel Stewart went into the octagon?
Uh, depend. I mean, he was a great amateur boxer, but I mean, I gotta think at this point it would just be like every other boxing performance. You know, I mean, I can't think that he would have done better than Melton Bowen.
Melton Bowen, who basically did, I think, was our best boxer realistically out of the entire boxers we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think any boxer at this point who was entering into competition would just be taken down, sat on until they tired out, and then tap out.
For boxers, that Panai Tap era never really ended, as James Toney discovered.
Yeah, that still has never ended for boxers and MMA. But yeah, I can't think Emmanuel Stewart would have done any better
Now,
than.
not much else to really say about Emmanuel Stewart other than he should stay far away from the octagon at all times.
Well, yeah, or well, not that's not so much a concern anymore. But
Yeah. Too soon? Too soon?
too soon.
Okay.
Um. So, and what also this Beneteau fight here was a great example of once again shoes being a terrible idea. Beneteau Taktarov.
Yes, as always, shoes are never a good idea to bring in the cage, but back then you still could wear them.
Yeah, you ran for a long time forward. I like the last guy to wear shoes in the octagon was it was like another 10 or 15 events, I want to say.
Yeah, I think we're probably still talking like what, like probably lines in a guy like Pete Williams maybe.
Oh, I can't remember. I had to look. I did a bunch of MMA trivia. I had to figure this out, and it was like UFC 24 or something.
Wow. All right, let's keep our eyes open. It was probably Kevin Randleman. I bet it was probably Randleman.
No, it was some. It was like a under prelim. It was some guy you'd never hear of. You would never know him except that he's the answer to a trivia question. Who was the last guy to wear shoes in the octagon?
Well, right now our discussion about who was the last guy to wear shoes octagon has gone on longer than the actual fight itself went, so that's pretty impressive right there.
Yeah, and so in general, Taktarov, he had a picture-perfect rolling knee bar, or rolling leg, rolling heel hook. He had a great dive. Technique was beautiful. That is, in fact, a technique that you don't really see in MMA anymore. It's
No,
too high risk, low reward. But it was beautiful for this fight, and worked all the better because Beneteau was wearing shoes.
Yeah, it works a lot. These locks in general work a lot better when the dudes wear shoes. Unfortunately, it didn't work as well in Oleg's favor because he got a kick in the face, which was illegal, as they did mention immediately after. So he got kicked in the face by a guy wearing shoes. The kick in the face was, I guess, legal, but wearing the shoes was not, oddly enough.
Yeah, that was one of the things they keep. I mean, they've had this rule basically since UFC 1, I think, or since like UFC 3 at the latest, that says you can't wear shoes and kick, but they never talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, the only time they ever mentioned was I think Ken Shamrock was wearing them at UFC 6 when he fought Severn, but
Yeah.
again, that was such a short match, it barely came up. It was just a thing they said, he can't throw kicks, that was it.
Yeah. It keeps every time somebody does it, they talk about it when they see somebody wearing shoes, but they never talk about it like before, in the intros to the event. It's never mentioned in the rules of the octagon that you can't wear shoes.
That's because there are no rules, Zane. There are no rules.
There are no rules. That's right. It's as real as it gets. No kicking with shoes on.
Just like on the streets.
That's just like on the streets.
Yeah, so that's our third fight. Let's just move right on then to the night, which is Marco Ruas, the most recent UFC champion, and according to Bruce Beck, the unofficial favorite for some reason. He's going to be taking on Keith Hackney, the Giant Killer from UFC 3, and also the man who ruptured Joe Son's testicles at UFC 4.
Keith Hackney will always have a special place in my heart for that. For he was a Czech Congo ahead of his time.
Breaking balls since 1993.
That's right. But yeah, we got a great Al Pacino intro from Rich Goings here.
Ruas.
That's right. He did it twice because it's like so you first you get oh shoot yeah
even Don Wilson was saying that too, by the way. Like even Don Greg Wilson was going, Oh, Marco Huas has got him in this, and Huas,
Yeah,
Huas.
yeah, you get Marco Ruas, and then a second later, hoo-ha!
I wish I could find a clip of that to cut in, so I'm gonna try and find one just because.
Hoo-ha! 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 Hoo-ha!
That still somehow sticks out in my mind is how the easiest way to identify Al Pacino for no good reason.
Now I want
But
to put in the scene of like John Travolta and Saturday Night Fever going Al Pacino.
Al Pacino.
That was my Travolta, by the way. Yeah, I'll never do that again. I'm sorry. Everybody saw that. I'm sorry.
Oh.
So I made a little note on my paper here that says, I basically found a new name for Keith Hackney. Because he is a white tiger kung fu guy, right? So he's like pawing at the air with his tiger paws, I guess. I'm not gonna call them claws because they're paws the way he does it. I just realized he is basically the white Power Ranger.
He is. Although, hey, the Green Power Rangers in MMA now.
That's right. Jason David Frank is. So it only makes sense that Keith Hackney was there for the White Ranger, and he probably, he probably was the real White Ranger because that was the whole mystery when that show was first on. Like, who is the White Ranger? It wasn't Tommy. It was Keith Hackney, but he broke his hand beating up Manuel Yarbrough, so they had to get Tommy to fill in.
That's right. What was it? Keith Hackney was actually a Hollywood stuntman, I'm pretty sure, which is why, he looks exactly like a Hollywood stuntman in there.
He pretty much does. It's pretty true. You need to give him like a leather members only jacket, and it's him.
Exactly. But did you hear the great, fantastic intro they gave Marco Ruas for this Beyond the Al Pacino thing?
What do they call Marco Huas?
It was the quote. Brazilian men are like American women. They don't like to tell their ages.
I did catch that. Yeah, that was bizarre. I don't even know how they're still getting away with that. I'm assuming it's just a thing on the pay-per-view itself. I'm sure for the commission or whatever was sanctioning them back then, he had to give something for age, I feel like. But yeah, it's still funny. Like, he's still pretending his age doesn't exist or whatever. He's just timeless vampire, which is why Don Wilson is there to fight him in the end.
And then it also leads, of course, to the commentary trying to guess his age throughout the fight. Like, I think he's about 35, 36.
We'll never know because he's a vampire.
That's right. He's a time traveler.
Time-traveling vampire.
That's right, time-traveling vampire. Don the Dragon Wilson's going to shoot him right at the end of the... And
just throw a stake through his heart like a javelin through the octagon fence.
That's right. Like Night Hunter.
That's what happens when a vampire meets a dragon in the octagon.
That's right.
It's as real as it gets.
So yeah, this was really once again a pretty fucking fantastic performance from Marco Ruas here, and really this is a modern modern MMA performance. You would see this at any point in the UFC. I could watch a fight. I'm going to be watching the UFC event, later on, and I will see somebody have this exact fight.
I mean, as we brought up before, Ruas really was the most well-rounded, most complete fighter outside of Ken Shamrock. So yeah, I mean, it only makes sense that he's still the dude that can actually do all these things. And against a guy like Hackney, again, like as we mentioned before with Jenner versus Abbott, this is a fight of really old UFC style versus the newer UFC style. And Hackney is still, the only guy out there doing this kung fu hand stuff. And Ruas is just like, nah, son, it's over.
Yeah, he threw a few punches to get into the clinch, clinched up, drug him down, got on his back, stretched him out, threw some brutal punches to the back of Hackney's head. That was hard to watch.
Yeah, those are still legal at this point in UFC history, and we're not going to be seeing those go away for a little bit while longer.
No, so instead of doing, these days you'd see the hooking punches to the side of the head, but he was just drilling away at the back of Hackney's skull, and then he sunk in the rear naked choke, and that was it.
That's pretty much it. There's not much else really to say about it either. It's fine. I keep saying that, but it's really what's happened this night. It's really first round is very dominant performances.
But it's what you'd see out of any dominant BJJ grappler right now, today in the octagon. That's the exact same game plan.
And it's unfortunate that a lot of our favorites had to lose also. We're big fans of Varelans. We love Hackney. We love our Ninja Cop, but unfortunately they just weren't evolving. and they had to go because the other guys that were better were just, they're basically in their way. So obviously it was going to be a quick night for the guys who didn't know what to do.
But it means too, going through to the second round, you get Ruas, Severn, Taktarov, and Abbott.
Which is like a dream matchup right there. Like the combination of any four of those guys is like a dream come true for the UFC.
Exactly. So you really got, you got these matchups going on to the second round that were just fantastic. That could not be undersold, except maybe with an extremely awkward interview by Kimo Leopoldo.
Yes. And before we jump into that too, I did want to mention. I don't know if you saw this, Zane. I like to spot people here and there. Did you catch our young friend Pedro Hizo outside of the octagon after Ruas was leaving?
I did not. I missed Pedro Hizo.
I think this is the second sighting we've had of Hizo because, again, he's training under Ruas. He is Ruas' protege. He was there. He was at the cage as Ruas was coming out, and we'll see him again the rest of the night. But, yeah, Pedro Hizo's there. And really this night, I don't know if I guess we'll talk about it as they happen, but there's actually a lot of guys who we're going to be seeing in the UFC very soon.
Yeah.
There's about 4 of them, I think, tonight that were just hanging around, and we're going to see them in the next, basically one of them in the next event even. So, yeah. But, yeah, as you mentioned, let's just talk about Kimo because Kimo's there, and again, this is the Silver Vision UK DVD release that we're looking at, which has the original pay-per-view broadcast, and this original broadcast already had advertisements for UFC 8.
Yep. And so, yeah, Kimo's there, and I noticed, especially with his shorter hair now, and with his new facial hair and glasses, his face really looks like a catcher's mitt.
Yeah, he's caught a lot of punches, I think, with that face, so yeah, that makes sense.
It's really puffy, and then his actual mouth and nose and eyes are really small.
Well, before we talk any further, I just have to say I want to praise Jesus.
Okay, yeah, no, can't start talking about Kimo without a good Jesus shout out.
Yeah, and apparently he can't talk about anything without doing that either. Shout out to my homie, my Lord Jesus.
That's right. I love how this interview, he basically admits that he had 0 martial arts experience going into the UFC, and that his whole Taekwondo black belt was totally made up.
Yeah, he didn't quite say that, even though it's basically what he did say. Ultimately, read between the lines. He didn't just flat out say, I never did Taekwondo, but we know he didn't. And now he basically just said, I'm finally training some real technique this time.
He said, I was just a baller, and now I'm trying to actually get some technique. So, reading between the lines, you realize that when he's been advertised with a 3rd-degree black belt in Taekwondo, and he's just now talking about learning some technique.
It's about time, considering he just fought in that pancreation tournament, as he said.
That's right.
In between his time in the UFC, he basically went over to Japan, he fought in Hawaii, he did some other stuff here and there, including apparently this pancreation tournament, which I guess is next year liver. I don't know what's going on with that.
The funny thing is that for how, inexorably linked to Joe-san and all that Kimo was, and how much like Varelans and Abbott, he was one of the biggest recipients of the UFC fake hype machine. He also was really pretty, he had a pretty decent career, all things considered.
He did.
He was actually a tough dude and a hell of a good athlete.
He just never really had much in terms of techniques, even towards the end of his career. He still never really picked up any techniques to help further him along, because he could have been better. He made good for himself, for what he did.
Yeah. You consider that he came in with nothing, just like he was a college football player. That, him
was bestowed the power of Jesus Christ into him by Joe's son.
Yeah, who bestowed the power of Jesus Christ by Joe's son and did a whole hell of a lot of drugs in between. That was, we may have been seeing Kimo high right there.
Most likely, yeah. That's why he's wearing the glasses.
Yeah, wearing his sunglasses inside the arena.
I liked when I've written down here, Blatnick asks him how martial arts have changed since the UFC, and he says martial arts is now a sport, where before it was just straight ahead and doing little exercises. The hell does that even mean? I don't even know. I kind of think I know what he means, but what the hell? Little exercises and Kimo, put on your alleged Taekwondo black belt and do some real training.
That's right. So yeah, we got a nice Kimo interview to break up the tournament halves, and then we're straight back into the fights.
That's right. We're back now in the semifinals, which now have 18-minute time limits. And unlike our first rounds that ended all within like a minute or two at most, basically, both these fights go the distance.
Yeah. The rest of the event, like it was, really, really front heavy on the action.
Not to say it's downhill from here, it's just things get a lot slower.
Yeah, they get a lot slower. But yeah, so now we get Tank Abbott back in the octagon. Actually, they gave him a pretty decent, what felt like a decently relevant bare knuckle boxing record of 7-0. I could just about believe that for Tank.
Yeah, it's actually something that sounds more legitimate than 500-0.
Yeah, it sounded pretty legit. And we also got Don Wilson immediately questioning the validity of Tank Abbott's martial arts background.
That's right, yeah, he said pit fighting, whatever that is, versus
He's
wrestling.
like, I live in that area.
And then that went on for about a minute.
Yeah, he's like, I live in that area. I've never heard of pit fighting, so maybe he's totally making it up.
And he probably totally was, because, yeah, as we know, pit fighting is not a real thing. It is a video game, but it's not a real martial arts style.
Yeah, not a real martial arts style. But I gotta say, we got Tank Abbott, Dan Severn. We're rocking and rolling, and Tank Abbott for like a minute, 2 minutes maybe, really did an excellent job.
Yeah, no, the first I think it was about 2 or 3 minutes. He was defending. He was looking really aggressive, and then things went sour real quick for the guy.
Yeah, he threw a really stupid knee. He had the front headlock, and he tried to throw a knee in from the front headlock. Took both his feet off the ground, and Severn just bulldogged him. And that was... This was... You know what? I mean, I felt like this was where the commentary really started to bug me. Because Severn brutalized Tank Abbott.
Yeah, he spent the next, I believe he had it, basically the next 15 minutes just pounding on him. Just all over this place, just dominantly. You know, this time he's actually using his hands. Unlike the last fight, he didn't throw any strikes at all. This time he's constantly going for knees, punches, elbows to the back of the head, to the side of the head, to the body. He's trying to find a submission, like the whole 15 minutes, and Tank's just laying on his stomach, just absorbing blows.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if it's just because I was listening to it through headphones or whatever, but like the mix for this DVD, I could hear every shot he landed. You could hear the thump of like every knee, an elbow straight to the back of his head, just as like driving his body into the mat. And it just sounded brutal. And the ringside, they're just like, he's really not getting anything behind these shots. It's just like, no. Tank is, he's a receptacle made to suck up damage. That's all that you can take out of this fight. Like,
that is a bizarre choice of words, Zane.
The fact that at the end of the 18 minutes, he was like, at the end of 15 minutes, he was jumping up to his feet and trying to land stuff, that was unbelievable. I mean...
Yeah, basically with like 3 minutes left in the fight, Tank finally gets himself back to his feet by just climbing up the fence. Even then, Severn is still clinching him and working him over. But basically, as soon as the fight's nearly over, 10 seconds left in the round, they finally break free of each other, and Tank actually does try and throw a few strikes.
Yeah, I mean, he gave it his best shot, but he absorbed a hell of a lot of damage. That's a career-shortening loss right there.
Yeah, it did not make him look too good. I mean, basically all it did was show that Tank Abbott could take a lot of abuse. And I'm wondering if that was part of his strategy, was just to let Severn tire himself out. But I think that backfired hardly, because by the end of it, when Tank did get up in those last 10 seconds, his strikes were like beyond sobby. He throws like that one really loopy right hand, and he basically falls over trying to do it.
Yeah, he just ate, like 30 knees to the body, knees to the head, elbows to the back of the head for, like 5 minutes of elbows to the back of his head, basically.
I mean, this was basically a demoralizing loss for Tank. He just didn't do much at all in this fight.
Severn, he ran after the fight, the moment it ended, he ran out of the cage, except they wouldn't unlock it, so he climbed out of the cage.
Which is easily one of the greatest moments we've seen in UFC so far, is when Tank, totally disappointed and he knows he lost this fight, just climbs over the cage and just walks out of the arena.
And with John McCarthy screaming at him to get back in the cage for some reason, like he needed to be there still.
Yeah, on the plus side, I mean, this shows that the judges worked because this is our first time using the judges tonight, and the judges all scored it correctly, and that was a unanimous decision for Dan Severn. So, yay, they're getting it right so far.
That's right. They all got their Sharpies out and wrote on the back of the paper plates.
I love their scorecards. That's what they are. It's literally it's like someone gave them some sixth grade teacher walked around, handed them paper plates and a stick to glue it on. They write the name of the guy they think won, and they hold it up and wave it around, and that's how the judges score the fight. Not like a little piece of paper where they're writing down their numbers 10-9, 10-8. No, it's physically a round piece of paper so that they can't cut themselves, and they hold up with a stick. That's it.
I mean, like, to me, it's like, how hard would it have been to print out cards with all the fighters' names on them?
This is early UFC. I mean, they're going to spend $150 in the winter. They can't afford any but paper plates right now.
That's right. Oh, that was a serious step down in quality.
Yeah.
That undercut so many of the good production value they had. So much of the good production value they had.
Right, it did, because there are also no ring card girls this time around.
You know what? I didn't even think of that until you just mentioned it. But yeah, there must have been some serious money saving going on for this.
Usually we get the women walking around with the cards of each guy's style, and that comes back to the next event. Ultimate did not have that, probably because of that $150,000 going to the winner.
Yeah, also maybe because Andy Anderson wasn't invited.
Andy Anderson, he was not there. We haven't referenced him in a while. So yeah, Andy Anderson, and also WMAC Masters, just because.
That's right, WMAC Masters, just because. Got our Superfoot, got our WMAC Masters, got our Andy Anderson. All is well.
All is well in the world.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, my biggest takeaway for this, other than Dan Severn just dominating Tank Abbott utterly, was just the commentary was really hard to listen to.
Mostly, I think, because of Don Wilson. He's just constantly bitching and complaining about stuff.
Yeah, he was just constantly crapping on Dan Severn's striking, that like he should be doing something other than he was to totally destroy Tank Abbott in there.
I think the other thing to take away too is also this point, in the past we've seen Tank be pretty dominant, pretty competitive, and even in the first round of this fight he was. But then in this fight we kind of started to see his weaknesses. That is the lack of cardio, lack of knowledge, and the lack of giving a damn when he's in these bad situations.
Yeah.
I think he just mentally crapped out. I think that's what it was. Is physically he probably could have done something, but he just kept taking a beating. I feel like he may have been trying to think of like a rope-a-dope strategy, just let Severn tire himself out. But unfortunately, in doing so, I think he didn't realize that taking a beating actually tires you out also, and he could recover from it.
And also, I mean, his wrestling was better than 95% of the people who were going to enter this competition. Maybe 99. It was basically him and Severn. But it was not good. His wrestling was better than everyone else, but it was not good, great wrestling technique.
Yeah, Severn, Tank, he could have gotten the job done, but just outclassed Severn, and this is really, not the last time we're going to see Tank in the cage at all in the UFC cage, but this is the kind of start where we start to kind of question his abilities a little bit. So we'll see what happens in the future. But for right now, it's dangerous waters for Tank, especially because coming up soon, he's going to have some pretty big trouble with the UFC. But we'll talk about that next time.
All right. So, I got last thing before we're, beyond the crowd chanting USA throughout the fight, which I thought was hilarious. But have you looked into attending Grand Canyon University? Because apparently they have a degree in martial arts.
I have not, but I think we should see if they have an online course in that we can both take.
That's right. I would love to get a martial arts degree. Maybe I can get my bachelor's of martial arts.
I had to turn the page in my notes. Yeah. So also one thing, I don't know if you noticed this at all. Did you see who was in Dan Severn's corner at the end of this fight?
Yeah, Don Fry, the Predator.
That is correct, Don the Predator Fry, who we're going to see in the next episode also. This is, again, one of the guys we're going to see very soon. Don Fry wearing his American flag Zubaz pants with the whole Severn team in their American flag Zubaz. I think they were sponsored by them. We're going to see Don Fry UFC 8, which is coming up very soon, as we know, because there's advertisements constantly in this event for it. So Don Fry, we have a lot to look forward to with him as well now.
Totally. And we all did you also hear after the event they were talking about how Severn really wanted to win this because he realized that he didn't have much time left in the sport.
Ha ha ha. 100 fights later.
100 fights and 20 years later. Oh, Don. Oh, Dan, rather. So, on to the next fight. I mean, because there's no interchange between matches here. They're just, get them out of the cage, bring the next guys in, and we're rolling. We have Oleg Taktarov versus Marco Ruas.
Marco Ruas, that's right, against the Russian Bear. We got Russia versus Brazil now in a match of two very skilled grapplers, which is unfortunately, I don't know. I mean, if we compare it to the last fight, was it as exciting as a Severn versus Abbott, or was it more boring? I can't really. It's hard to say. I felt it was a little bit slower, even though
it was a little less exciting. Severn, he really. He made sure that he created offense all throughout that fight. Ruas did not.
That was ultimately the deciding factor in that. But I mean, comparatively to the last fight we just saw, which is mostly Severn just constantly pummeling the crap out of his opponent. In this fight, we saw less of that, but much more impactful things happening, I guess is the argument there.
Ruas, as we know from past, he has this really slow, staid fighting style. Like, he never pushes himself. He never pushes the pace. That's not what he does. He's always waiting patiently for an opening, trying to find just the right moment to throw a technique or a strike,
Which, unfortunately, in this fight did not really help him that much. It was definitely his downfall.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the highlights of this fight, because it was a slow fight for the most part. I think my favorite moment, though, was early on in the fight when they were clinching against the cage, and Ruas foot stomped Oleg, and then his face started bleeding. That was pretty great.
Yeah, that was pretty great. That was also where they couldn't the announcers couldn't figure out whose foot was whose while watching.
It was some pretty sloppy camera work, not gonna lie. It was kind of confusing too. But then again, you guys are right in front of it, so I would think theoretically you could see who was who.
One guy's on top, his feet are gonna be pointing down. The other guy's at the bottom, his feet are gonna be pointing up.
Yeah, not that hard, Don Wilson. Not that hard. If you can tell the difference between a dragon and a vampire, I think you can tell the difference between whose foot is whose.
That's especially because Marco Ruas has size 13 feet. One of these.
Yeah, he's got his Peggy Hill size 13 feet. I mean, you should be able to tell the difference just based on that alone.
Yeah. You should be able to see which one of the feet is blocking out the light from the sun. That's Ruas.
Yeah, I mean, besides that, Oleg was going for a lot of his leg locks. He went for a rolling knee bar, diving leg scissors. And this is all in the first half of the fight, mind you. He's just going for constantly a lot of submission attacks, while Ruas didn't really do much in the first half of the fight, aside from a leg kick here and there that Oleg did not know how to defend, and this bothered the crap out of Don the Dragon Wilson.
Yeah. I mean, I understand. Like, it was nice at times to have Don talking about technique, because he would actually talk about technique and not just make shit up like Blatnick, where it was, he would just be like, well, you use the guard to put your feet on the other guy and keep him off you. I was like, well, that's not really, but so, I mean, Don was at least, he understood what was going on technically, but mostly what he understood was how deficient the striking was, and he could not shut up about it.
So I think my biggest moment of the fight was when Oleg had that guillotine choke on Ruas, and then they got restarted. That was some bullshit.
Yeah, that was some bullshit. I mean, McCarthy so rarely used the restart in that fight, and it wasn't like that guillotine was especially close, but that felt like of all the moments you could use a restart, that probably didn't need one.
Yeah, because Oleg still had the arm around the head. So, I mean, he still had a guillotine. It might not have been as tight as it was a minute earlier, but he still had that submission. And he's in a dominant position. Why would you restart him for the doctor to check him when he's actually winning the fight?
Yeah.
You're gonna let him lose the fight despite the fact that he's winning it at this point? Like, that makes no sense.
But we also, right before that restart, somebody threw something in the cage. I didn't see what it was, but the audience was starting to get a little rowdy.
Yeah, I couldn't know what it was either. It looked like a pencil or something. I don't know what the hell it was. It was some thin little thing. But yeah, even the audience getting a little bored of this fight because, they basically got like 4 awesome finishes one after another, and now they're sitting through 2 very long matches. And again, at least Severn and Tank. Severn was busy, This fight, it is much slower. We had the submission attempts from Oleg, a few strikes from Ruas, a few strikes from Oleg as well, but ultimately the whole fight itself was very slow paced. You could probably count the number of strikes on two hands.
Yeah, I mean, for the second half of the fight, you really just got Oleg slowly marching forward and Ruas slowly marching backward, and that was it. I mean,
It was pretty much Oleg being aggressive and Ruas not wanting to make contact.
yeah.
But Oleg was too tired to actually even do any real damage. But
Well, yeah,
Ruas
he's
just
too
wanted
tired.
reason to go forward.
Too tired and 2 foot slow. I mean, that's one of the things you really see early in these fights. It's still something you see in the UFC today. Is a lot of guys who are really not quick on their feet, don't have the light, up on the balls of their feet, moving in and out, and able to close distance really effectively.
Yeah.
But still,
Especially this one too. Oleg kind of sucked with his boxing. Still, let's be serious here. He sucked at boxing. Yeah. He had no movement. He was just basically he was just tough. He could take a lot of abuse, and that was the best he could do.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, that's one of the hallmarks of this era of the UFC was about who can take punishment, who's gonna get hit and keep moving and keep being aggressive.
I thought you were gonna quote Rocky Balboa there for a second.
Oh no, I don't know Rocky. I don't know Rocky well enough to quote it.
You almost quoted the whole catchphrase from Rocky 6 right there. It's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit. Keep moving forward.
There you go. See, I got you to quote it.
Yeah, oh, thanks. All right, well. I mean, that's first fight, though. I mean, Oleg wins this fight by unanimous decision, so judges are 2 for 2.
Yeah.
Although, apparently, Ruas was complaining after, saying he was, Ruas thought he did better because Oleg's face was bleeding. But, again, this is a guy where, Oleg goes in the shower, the water cuts him open. So he's going to bleed no matter what you do.
Yeah. I would say, well, this is what I found interesting. I think in modern, and this could be up for debate, but I think in modern MMA judging, Ruas wins that fight.
I don't know. That's debatable because, he did throw more effective leg kicks, but Oleg was trying to finish the fight, and he was going for those submission attempts, even if they failed. I mean, he had a few of them in pretty tight. So
they don't really count failed submission attempts anymore, and Ruas had top control, and he threw the more damaging strikes over the course of the fight.
That's true. I mean, maybe this should be our question then. Should this be our poll question for the day?
Yeah, I think that's our poll question because I honestly think with modern MMA judging, Marco Ruas wins that fight. And maybe he shouldn't have, but I think he does.
So then that's going to be our poll question for this event, which you can vote on BloodyElbow.com, and that was who would have won Ruas and Taktarov if it was scored with modern-day judges. And that means y'all got to sit through and watch this fight like we had to.
That's right.
Suffer for your sins.
Suffer, damn it. And afterward, if you sit through it, though, you are treated to the elegant and classy Ken Shamrock.
That's right. We have another UFC 8 ad, which, by the way, obviously, if you haven't figured out by now, UFC 8 is headlined by the super fight between Ken Shamrock and Kimo Leopoldo because Kimo earned himself a super fight title shot. Whatever.
And while Kimo may be dressed like an 80s drug dealer, Ken Shamrock is dressed like he's going to the Goon Opera.
But he's wearing his bizarre half tuxedo, half suit with some kind of scarpet, I guess, or an ascot. Yeah. I don't know what's wearing around his neck.
An opera scarf is what it is. It's an opera scarf.
Opera scarf. Jeez, he has opera glasses in his pocket somewhere, I guess, to get a better view of the fights.
That's right.
That's probably what was thrown into the cage. I think Ken threw his opera glasses into the cage.
threw his opera glasses into the cage as a favor. He's tendering the fighters with a favor.
I mean, luckily Ken is our moment of clarity in this whole event in terms of commentary because he actually knows what he's talking about. He doesn't really say anything goofy or funny. He's just kind of there. He's kind of like, this is what's going to happen. It was all very straightforward.
Yeah.
What I did like, though, was that, again, who was with him? Did you see who was around him today?
I didn't. Who was...
Well, immediately behind him is Jerry Bolander.
Oh, yeah.
And to Bolander, if you're seeing from where Bolander is, but if you're watching on screen, I'll say it that way. Right to his right is Pete Williams. And then if you scoot over a little bit, as the camera pans out when the interview is done, you actually see Frank Shamrock on the opposite side of them, opposite side of the guardrails, like by cage side, just kind of sitting in a chair with his arms folded, like ignoring everything.
That is Frank. Frank's always around when in the early UFC events. He's always there somewhere.
Yeah, but unlike Petey and Jerry, who are all like excited and they're on camera, Frank's like to the side. He looks pissed off. It makes you wonder a little bit, what's going on at this point with Ken and Frank's relationship.
Well, I mean, this is when they were still spending all their time working together, so probably not a lot of good things.
Not particularly. So this could have been our first on-camera sight of them starting to hate each other a little bit, or at the very least Frank starting to resent Ken a little bit, or vice versa. So just something to notice. What this actually meant, who knows? Could have just been that Frank just really didn't give a crap. But who knows? Considering what year this was, it's December 16, 1995. I think it's safe to say things were starting to turn a little bit.
Probably. I mean, it wasn't that long after this that Frank would start to have a lot of success and get out of the Lion's Den. So.
Yeah, so that's pretty much that. And the good news too is now Ken Shamrock will join the commentary booth for our final fight of the evening. We're now at the $150,000 fight of the Ultimate, the finals.
We have Ken. So now we have Dan Severn versus Oleg Taktarov for the ultimate finale.
Now spin.
In the red corner.
Spin for me, Zane. Spin.
I'm sitting. I have a back and a sides to the chair. I can't spin. Here. There.
That was so worth it.
So yes, Dan Severn, Oleg Taktarov, the ultimate face-off.
And a rematch of UFC 5 also, which is something that no one mentions until Ken mentions it like 5 minutes into the fight. This is actually a rematch from UFC 5.
That's right. Yeah, even I had blanked on that until then.
Yeah, none of them mentioned it, which is surprising because it was a big deal. That was the event that Severn ultimately won. He had to get through Oleg's debut. So, that was kind of, we're basically getting them now, and they're a little bit more even in terms of their experience level here. And obviously they're both tired and drained as hell at this point, but they both had very grueling fights they just had to deal with. And we don't really know how much of a break they had in between, but probably not much.
I mean, we were getting the live pay-per-view feeds. I think they mentioned it in there that there was no break. Basically, there was a break for that interview, and that was it.
That's pretty horrible. Then. I mean, that's a tough night for Ever Advances, considering what they just had to go through.
That's one of the big reasons that they started doing the super fight, because they could put it right before the tournament finale, and you get like 30 minutes for everyone to rest up before the next fight.
So, did you catch Go-Go Goins' catchphrase for this fight?
It wasn't roll.
No, actually, this time and this was I was getting you to do your bufferism, because he actually kind of spelled buffer, and he went and said, "Let's rumble," and then he stormed out of the cage. So he couldn't quite say, "Let's get ready to rumble." He just said, "Let's rumble," and then he gets out of there.
Yeah, that's right.
I think he might have been referring to a rumble with the Jets and the Sharks, possibly, though. That's my theory on that one.
That's a good theory. That's having seen Goings do a few of these, that sounds right. He was probably, he was probably about to go outside and watch a gang fight in the street.
Yeah, which would have been more exciting than this fight.
Yes, this. Let's see.
I took some notes, but really there's very little to say considering we have Oleg and Dan. They're not exactly necessarily the most exciting guys to watch in general. Right from the start, Dan goes after Oleg's cuts, which is the smartest thing to do because Oleg was bleeding like a pig in his last fight.
Yeah.
He has now a bandage over his eye, but that doesn't last for long because Severn just opens that up and he makes it much, much worse as the fight wears on.
Yeah, I before it started, I said, fights where guys are going 30 minutes at a time is a terrible idea. With no fill-ins is a terrible idea. And let's see, bad. Also, but I did enjoy where Severn, because they were both so exhausted, Severn just sort of went full sissy fight mode in the beginning.
Oh, I just started slapping at him. Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
I know Oleg wasn't a fan of that.
No.
No, but ultimately, it worked out well for him, though. Eventually Oleg got his chance to get in, close distance, and he actually got a really good rolling knee bar that Shamrock actually thought was going to end the fight, which he kept saying the next 2 minutes as Oleg is looking for a knee bar. He's like, it's over.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, it was not over.
No. it was really exciting early on. That the D-bar was awesome. It was fantastic. It was really close. And Severn did a great job to defend it. It was great, and had the fight ended then and there, it would have been electric. And instead, it was, it was a slow burn.
It was a very slow burn. I mean, I'm looking at my notes, and there's not much that I have in these notes, really, because it wasn't much happening. It was just, once after that knee bar explosion happened, Severn just got on top of him and just grinded it out, basically.
Yeah, he was not throwing strikes anymore. He was exhausted. He was slapping at Taktarov's face to open up cuts and doing a lot of forearm and elbow in the throat and forehead, but not actually throwing elbows, just kind of grinding into him.
There just wasn't much happening. I mean, it's hard to really talk about this because there was so little happening.
Yeah. And then finally, Taktarov, he got up later, and there was a lot of circling and some strikes, which Taktarov was the better striker, which was, as we just said, Taktarov's boxing was not good.
Not so much, no. Yeah, I do want to say that, as the fight wore on, I thought, especially when it went to the overtime round, because this fight went the full 30 minutes, I thought Severn was actually getting stronger, whereas Oleg was just dying. He was drained, fatigued, and I think that's kind of the difference between their two fighting mentalities also, is, Oleg is that Russian bear. He's always coming forward, but the difference between him and what Dan Severn's doing is that Oleg is surviving and just not quitting, whereas Severn is actually continuing to push forward.
Well, Severn was...
Even though he's tired, even though he's just as tired as Oleg, he was continuing to move forward, and he wasn't going to quit either, but he wasn't just going to stand there and do nothing.
Yeah. Well, Severn, I mean, he was excellently conditioned for long, drawn-out battles. I mean, that was... he had a whole wrestling career that was ready to just go match after match after match after match when your body's quitting on you. And that was what he was continually able to show in the UFC, was that he was always ready to go an extra, he was always ready for the next fight.
And he'd be able to finish guys that were a lower skill level, but when it came to time to fight guys that were more towards his level, then finishing was not going to happen.
No, he didn't. And it's not even, like I say, part of that too is just because this was an era characterized by guys' willingness and ability to take damage. It was not, in this fight he didn't land a lot hard, but he beat the piss out of Tank Abbott for 18 minutes, and Tank Abbott was still in there trying to throw strikes. And so a lot of that, too, it's got to be given credit to the fact that guys like Taktarov and Abbott and Ruas were just, they could just absorb a ton of damage.
And back then, that was the thing to have. If you couldn't do that, there was no place for you in the UFC. But as we're going to start seeing, that will begin to change a little bit. Not that guys get less tough, but more so, we'll really see at the next event. The skill level is going to change drastically.
No, well, yeah. Once you get guys who can box a little better, then it doesn't matter how much damage you can absorb, because somebody can find a way to knock you out. But nobody was knocking people out in the early UFC events unless it was through some monstrous, devastating elbows on the ground, or the early karate guys got knocked out because they just were terrible.
Yeah, it was rare to see like a really great looking knockout. Really, until I'd say probably the most memorable one up until this point will be Tank Abbott's knockout or knockout shot.
And what was it? Not Harold Howard knocking out the Muay Thai guy.
Roland Payne.
Roland Payne. That was a pretty excellent knockout.
Luckily we're going to get our fill of that coming up in the next event, which I guess we're going to start talking about in a little bit. But yeah, either way, not exactly the most exciting fight to watch, but...
It was a really down note and a great event on.
It still wasn't a bad event at all. It was still a pretty great event. It just, we got to see the guys we wanted to see in there. We got to see the best of the best, and we got to see who was the best of the best of the best of the best in the octagon.
That's right. We got to see the ultimate of the ultimate.
Yeah, pretty much.
So yeah, it's definitely still an event that people should be watching, because you're seeing all the best fighters of that era face off, and you're starting to see. it's a monstrously different tournament than UFC 1, which is 2 years before it.
Yeah, I mean, who would have known that a guy like Dan Severn would walk in and basically, walk in UFC 4 as a wrestler and do pretty decent for himself, and then come back, essentially a year later to win the Ultimate tournament and basically show that he's got what it takes to be the best among the best.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's too bad that they couldn't get like Ken Shamrock in there. That would have been interesting. But as we were saying, I mean, you want to talk about some of the people that we didn't get to see. I mean, we got to see that Dan Severn won this tournament. Who should have been there?
I mean, Ken Shamrock definitely should have been in there. I mean, the first name on my list was Royce Gracie, but as we know, unfortunately, Royce had his falling out from the UFC at this point. So at this point, he was off in obscurity, doing God knows what, probably surfing and living in his parents' garage. So, I mean, Royce would have been wonderful to have seen this as well, but he would not have lasted at all. I mean, this would not have been a good day for Royce.
No, this would have been. I mean, they got Royce out of there right when they had to.
I mean, theoretically, unless Royce had gotten himself lucky and got in the same bracket with Jenham and with Hackney, yeah, he could have gone to the finals. But even then, I mean, I think Jenham would have done better against Royce. I think Hackney would have lost, but I think Jenham would have stood a chance to actually done some damage to Royce. And otherwise, everybody else's tournament, I don't really know what he could have done to like Tank Abbott or Severn. Again, we did Severn before, but that wouldn't happen again.
I mean, Royce could take a lot of punishment, but he couldn't dish it out in the way that they could.
No, he would fade out. I think Ken Shamrock would have been very fun to see in this event.
Yeah, he would have been fun to see. Yeah, because I mean, he obviously was pretty athletic and had a lot of good catch technique and all that, but his striking was also still pretty basic. So it would have been interesting to see where he would have fallen, in a tournament like this. It would have been. I would have loved to see Ken Shamrock fight Marco Ruas at the height of their career.
Yeah, Ken and Marco could have been actually a pretty interesting fight. I think it would have been a really slow and boring fight, though. That's my opinion on that. It would have been fun to see. It would have also been painful to watch.
Well, yeah, but I'm willing to sit through the pain to answer the question.
I do want to say I wanted to see Pat Smith. I would have been curious to see what he could have done this time around because he has been getting better at each show. I would have liked to see what Pat Smith could have done. I don't think he would have won it, but I think he would have given some tough fights. Would have given us some good moments.
Yeah, Pat Smith would have been. He would have been interesting, definitely. And trying to think, who else have we seen in past shows that we really would have been good to see here?
I wouldn't mind have seen John Hess use his SAFTA.
John Hess, yes. SAFTA master John Hess. Would have been fun to see him get knocked out.
Oh, speaking of, I just didn't even think of this now because he's been on the show, but Kimo could have been in this. His reputation from fighting Royce, that alone could have been enough to get him in there. But I guess, again, he already had this fight booked for the super fight at UFC 8. But it would have been fun to see Kimo potentially in this, especially because this would have been theoretically the new Kimo. So who knows what could have happened, but probably not much exciting. But it would have been fun to see. I mean, otherwise, I'm trying to think of who else might have been good to see at this point. Realistically, I think we really did get, at this point in time, the best of the best who was there.
Yeah, I mean, most
was available and sitting at home waiting to fight.
Most of the other questions have been answered. I mean, the guys who were there were the guys that had already beaten all of the past UFC competitors that were of any decent.
I mean, the only guy that would have been cool to see would have been Guy Mesger, but he hasn't really done anything at this point at all. But he should have been an alternate, in my opinion. He should have been an alternate.
Certainly over Trent Jenkins.
What's that?
Certainly over Trent Jenkins.
Yeah, Trent Jenkins. I don't know how they found that dude, but that's the other thing that's weird. It's like, for all these alternates, they had guys that had at least fought before in the UFC, but Trent Jenkins. What happened? Like, they couldn't get Guy Mesger, they couldn't get Harold Howard back, even. It's kind of bizarre. It didn't matter.
Harold Howard got in a car accident not long after this, maybe even at the same time. So,
all right, they could have got Marcus Bossett then.
Yeah. They could have got somebody back. That Trent Jenkins was a weird one. I would have liked to see Guy Mesger. Guy Mesger would have been fun here.
And unfortunately, Guy hasn't done anything still on screen really worth noting yet. But he'll get his chance later on too. His chance in Spotlight is coming up. But yeah, I mean, otherwise though, we got the best of the best, and it was still a really good event. I mean, Zane, did it live up to how you remembered it?
Yeah, I mean, it was. it was interesting that, like, I don't know, it definitely felt bigger than I remembered it even. Like, I feel more like having gone through them again sequentially and knowing and, spent much more time going through the sport's history. It felt like a bigger deal than I remembered. And for that, it felt more important. I mean, I still, the Ultimates are remembered as some of the most fun UFC events, but this, yeah, I mean, rightfully so. This is a lot of fun.
It's a really good show. Unfortunately, the first opening rounds, they were really quick. Then we got everything else being long. But even the long fights weren't the worst things in the world. I mean, we're making off the sound that they're not good, not worth watching. But they actually are worth watching. They're a little grueling at times to sit through, but we sat through worse, and we're gonna sit through worse.
Oh yeah, no God, yeah.
So these are just slow, long fights, and ultimately this again helps change the pacing of future events. As we'll see at UFC 8, right away things change and things get paced much better. So all in all, it was it's a learning experience as these old UFCs are, and this was a big turning point, and in my opinion also the end of the first era of UFC fighters.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it's definitely. I think the beginning of the second era was before this event, but this was definitely the end of the first era. This was when you really got like the end of the crossover point, where you got four guys in there who really represented the old style of competitor for the UFC, and you got four guys who really represented the new style of competitor, the success, and they just totally outclassed them.
That's pretty much what happened in this event. It was basically the chapter has closed on the old days of UFC 1, style versus style. Now we're in chapter 2, essentially, which is going to be UFC 8, which is the clean slate. And but it's the clean slate, but it's also continuing that old theory that they have, because the UFC 8 will be the David versus Goliath tournament.
Yes, which that is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, UFC 8, by the way, is easily one of my top 5 of all-time UFC events. I hope it lives up to the hype that I've remembered in my head. But I remember loving this thing when I used to watch it, and I think it's going to hold up pretty well because I remember a lot. I actually do remember a lot of it, and it's hard not to forget a lot of what happens in UFC 8 because there's just so many great moments. But let's just wrap up Ultimate Ultimate before we just dive into that. I mean, is there anything else to say about Ultimate Ultimate besides the fact that it's worth watching? It's a great event, and it closes the chapter on the old school. I mean, what else can we say about it?
Yeah, is there anybody that we don't see again after this? I mean, I feel like it's the end of Hackney or
the end of Hackney. It's the end of Jenum. It's the end of Benetau, I believe, in the UFC. I'm pretty sure it's the end of Benetau. I mean, let's see. Ruas, I don't think comes back either. So we're saying goodbye to him, I believe. I think he's done in the UFC. He's not done in MMA, obviously, but I'm pretty sure that's the last we're going to see him in the octagon. Oleg, I think also. I don't think we're going to see Oleg again.
This might be. I'm not totally.
Varelans is also gone, I believe. Varelans is gone too. I mean, really, besides Severn, I think most of these guys we're actually not going to see again in the UFC octagon.
Yeah, I mean, it's the farewell to a lot of people, and a fitting farewell, honestly.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I call this the clean slate, because UFC 8, we do have Ken Shamrock and Kimo as our super fight, which we can now look forward to. But ultimately, we're now getting guys who are new. We're getting new faces. We're going to start building new stars. And that's the difference, too, is all the old guys are gone. All of our old fan favorites, with the exception of Tank and Severn. I forgot about Tank. Tank is coming back, of course, but he's going to be gone for a little while for reasons we'll discuss in our next show.
Yeah.
But, we're getting a clean slate. We're getting all new guys. We're getting a whole new crop of fighters. We're seeing a skill level change as well again, a very big jump in skill level, I think, in UFC 8. And from here on out, I mean, things are going to get pretty good, and they're going to get a little bad again, but UFC 8, though, it's going to be a big one, and it's going to be a really good one.
Yep. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Well,
I don't think there's much else to say, right? I mean,
until next time, I got nothing.
Yeah, I got nothing, too. So I think we're done this week. I think we're done with our review of Ultimate 1995. I hope you guys will watch it. It's definitely an event worth checking out, and we'll see you guys next time at the UFC 8 in Bayamon, Puerto Rico, for the David vs. Goliath tournament.
All right. Until then.
I can't see you on screen. So
until then. There we go.
Okay, I'll assume that means you're done. So, yeah, I'll do this.
I got nothing as our closing, that was my close off.
I didn't like it. I wanted to do a second take.
All right. I got nothing.
All right, I
Until
got
next time, I got nothing. You got nothing. We're done here.
Show's over. Go home.
Go home. The old clock on the wall says that's all from the Old School MMA review.
Until next time, I am the Fight Nerd. That was Zane Simon. We got nothing. We'll see you next time for UFC 8. Goodbye, America, and whoever else is watching internationally.